Mara Ashwood had learned early in life that the best way to survive in her own home was to disappear. She was good at it. She knew which floorboards creaked near Celeste's room. She knew how to fold herself into the background of a conversation so completely that people would finish talking, look around, and forget she had ever been standing there. She knew how to keep her eyes down, her voice low, and her needs so small they barely existed. She had been practicing this kind of invisibility for 11 years, ever since her father remarried, and Celeste arrived with her mother and her bright, loud, demanding energy, filling every room like smoke. Mara did not hate Celeste. Hate would have required too much of her. What she felt was something quieter and much harder to explain. The ache of a person who keeps being told, in 100 small ways, that the space they occupy is an inconvenience. So when Celeste told her she would be attending the Luna selection ceremony as her personal attendant, carrying her garment bag, managing her accessories, staying 2 steps behind and 3 steps to the left, Mara agreed, because that was what she did. She agreed, she adjusted, and she disappeared. The Iron Vale Palace was nothing like anything Mara had ever seen. It sat at the top of a mountain range that turned violet at dusk, its stone walls older than any pack record she had ever read, its corridors long and lit by amber sconces that threw warm shadows across carved wolf crests. The kind of place that made a person feel small in a way that was almost beautiful. Hundreds of women had come for the selection. They moved through the moonlit hall in careful groups, their gowns catching the light, their conversations polished and deliberate. Every one of them had prepared for this night. Every one of them believed, on some level, that she could be chosen. Mara believed nothing of the sort. She was there to hold Celeste's bag. She stood near the back wall of the preparation chamber and watched her stepsister move in front of the mirror, adjusting the fall of her gown with practiced precision. Celeste was beautiful in the way that demanded acknowledgement: sharp cheekbones, dark eyes, a mouth that always seemed to be deciding whether to smile or not. She reached into a small glass bottle and pressed 3 drops of something amber-colored behind each ear. Mara had noticed the bottle before. She had never asked about it. It was not her business. Nothing in Celeste's life was her business. The ceremony began at moonrise. Mara watched from the side of the hall, invisible among the other attendants and staff. King Dorian Voss entered from the far doors, and the room shifted the way a room does when someone with real authority walks into it. Not because people were afraid exactly, but because something in the air changed weight. He was tall, composed, and moved like a man who had stopped being surprised by anything a long time ago. His expression was neutral in a way that was clearly practiced. Mara watched his eyes move across the room and thought he looked like someone carrying something very heavy, and doing it so long he had forgotten it was heavy. The presentation began. One by one, the candidates were introduced. Dorian walked the line slowly, unhurried, his pack advisors watching him with barely contained anxiety. The moon-bonded pull, what the elders called the true mate recognition, was supposed to be immediate. A warmth, a certainty, a pull behind the ribs that the wolf and the human both felt at once. It was not something a person could fake feeling. It was, apparently, something a person could try to steal. When Celeste stepped forward, Dorian slowed. Something passed across his face. Not the ignition Mara had read about in old pack texts, but a flicker. A warmth that arrived strangely, like a sound heard through a closed door. Not wrong enough to dismiss, not right enough to trust. His advisors exhaled with relief. Progress, they seemed to think. The king has reacted to someone. Celeste was escorted to the front as the leading candidate of the evening. Mara felt nothing about this except a low, familiar tiredness. She picked up the garment bag from the chair where she had set it and prepared to wait. She slipped out through a side door and found her way to a stone balcony on the east side of the palace. The mountain air was cold and clean. She leaned against the railing and looked out at the dark tree line below and the stars beginning to sharpen overhead. She was not thinking about the ceremony. She was thinking about going home, about the small room she had at the back of her family house, about the book she had left open on her bed, small, quiet things that belonged only to her. She heard footsteps and expected a palace attendant asking her to return inside. She did not turn around immediately. When she did, she found a man standing in the doorway of the corridor that opened onto the balcony. He was still wearing his formal attire from the ceremony, For one strange moment she did not fully register who he was, because he was not standing like a king. He was standing like a man who had needed air and was surprised to find someone else had the same idea. Then she recognized him and straightened so fast she nearly knocked into the railing. The moment she moved, something happened to him. She saw it because she had spent her whole life watching people from the edges of rooms. She knew how to read small shifts. His entire body went still. Not tense. Still. The way a person goes still when they hear something they were not expecting to hear and need a moment to be sure it is real. He took a step forward, slow, careful. She opened her mouth to apologize for being on the balcony. He said quietly, "It is you." Mara blinked. "I am sorry. I can go back inside. I did not mean to be somewhere I should not be." He was still looking at her with that expression she could not quite name. "What is your name?" "Mara Ashwood. I am here with my stepsister, Celeste. I am her attendant. I was only getting some air." She was aware she was speaking too fast. She pressed her lips together and stopped. "Mara Ashwood," he repeated, like he was placing it somewhere. Then he turned and went back inside without another word. She stood on the balcony for a long moment, wondering what had just happened, and then told herself it was nothing, and went back to waiting. It was not nothing. Dorian went directly to Elder Sira, the Moonkeeper, who had officiated selection ceremonies for longer than most pack members had been alive. He described what had happened in 2 sentences. Sira did not look surprised. She looked like someone who had been waiting for a particular piece of news to arrive. She had been watching Celeste Ashwood all evening. She had been watching the scent, layered in a way that was not natural, too carefully constructed, sitting on the surface of the skin rather than rising from it. She approached Celeste with a silver-threaded cloth, offering it as part of a traditional blessing. It was one of the oldest tests in the Moonkeeper's knowledge. Genuine mate scent lived inside a person, in the skin, in the blood, in something that could not be bottled or borrowed. It left a trace on silver thread. Anything applied from the outside left nothing. Celeste's wrists left nothing. She was brought before the king in a private receiving room. Her composure held for almost a full minute. Then it began to fracture at the edges, and what came out from underneath was not guilt, but indignation. She said she had only helped nature along. She said that everyone understood these things. She said that Mara, quiet, overlooked, late to shift, practically unknown in any pack circle, would make an embarrassing Luna, and that anyone with eyes could see Celeste was better suited for the role. She said all of this with the certainty of someone who had never once considered that wanting something very badly did not mean it belonged to her. Dorian let her finish. Then he said, "The cloth does not lie." The door opened and Mara entered. She had been brought from the preparation chamber with no explanation, only a polite and firm request from 2 palace guards. She did not know what she was walking into. She saw her stepsister's face first. She had seen Celeste angry before. She had seen her dismissive, triumphant, bored. She had never seen her look at Mara the way she looked at her now, like Mara had done something to her, like Mara had been the one reaching for something that did not belong to her. Mara stood very still and waited. Dorian explained what had been discovered. He was direct and did not use more words than necessary. When he finished, the room was very quiet. Celeste said, her voice cracking slightly at the edge, "You have always wanted everything I had." Mara was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I have never wanted the things you had, Celeste. I wanted to stop being erased in every room you entered. Those are not the same thing." Nobody in the room had anything to say to that. Celeste was escorted from the palace that night. She did not go quietly. She made the kind of scene that people remember for a long time, the kind that fills corridors and bounces off stone walls. Mara stood in a doorway and watched her go, and felt nothing except, very quietly, the strange sensation of something heavy beginning to lift. After the formal proceedings ended, and most of the palace had gone to bed, Dorian found Mara still in the small corridor near the east wing. He asked if she would speak with him for a few minutes. She looked at him with the careful eyes of someone who had learned not to trust easily. She said, "I think there has been a mistake somewhere." He said, "There has not." She folded her arms across her chest. "A scent is not a life. A bond is not a decision. I do not know you. You do not know me. I am not going to walk into a ceremony and accept a crown because the universe pointed at me. He was quiet for long enough that she thought she had offended him. Then he said, I know. She waited. I am not asking for any of that tonight, he said. I have ruled alone for a long time. I have been waiting for something real, and I have gotten very good at waiting. I am asking something much smaller than a crown. I am asking you to stay, not as anyone's attendant, not in anyone else's shadow, but as yourself, long enough for both of us to know whether this is something you would ever want to choose. She studied him, the way she always studied people. From the edges, carefully. She was looking for the assumption, the sense of entitlement beneath the careful words, the certainty that she would fall into place because that was what women in her position did. She did not find it. She found something she had not expected. She found a person who was asking with genuine uncertainty and who seemed to understand that uncertainty was the correct way to ask. She uncrossed her arms. She said she would think about it. He said that was more than he deserved tonight, and something in his voice told her he meant it. She stayed. Not because of the bond, or the ceremony, or the crown, or anything that had happened in the moonlit hall. She stayed because she had spent 11 years making herself smaller, to fit inside someone else's story, and she was tired of it. And for the first time, she was somewhere that was not organized around her stepsister's comfort. She stayed because she wanted to find out who she was, when no one was asking her to disappear. The weeks that followed were not a romance exactly. They were something more careful than that. Dorian kept his word with a consistency that surprised her. He did not pressure, did not assume, did not treat the bond as a finished sentence when it was still only a first word. He learned her the way she had always wanted to be learned. He noticed that she read a room before she trusted it. He noticed her dry humor, which came out slowly, and only when she was at ease. He noticed that she was most herself in quiet spaces. Libraries, balconies, early mornings, before the palace filled with noise. She learned him back. She learned the particular kind of exhaustion that came from a decade of carrying a territory alone. She learned that he went somewhere private behind his eyes in the evenings, looking at the mountains, and that he never explained it, but that it was not sadness. Exactly. More like a habit of solitude he had built so long ago he was not sure how to take it apart. They took it apart slowly, together, in the way that two people do when they have both been alone long enough to be careful about it. The Luna crowning happened 3 months later. It was quiet by palace standards. Elder Sira officiated, her voice steady and warm. There was no grand audience of hundreds. There were the people who mattered, and the mountains outside the windows, and the amber sconce light making the stone walls glow. When the crown was placed on Mara's head, she did not feel transformed. She did not feel like a different person. She felt, for the first time in her memory, like exactly the person she had always been, only visible, fully, finally, unhidingly visible. Dorian looked at her the way he had looked at her on the balcony the first night, like she was the fixed point everything else moved around. She looked back at him the same way. Outside, the mountains went dark, and the stars came out sharp and cold above Ironvale, and inside the palace, something that had been waiting a very long time settled quietly into place. Not because anyone had stolen it or borrowed it or dressed it up in something it was not. Because it was real, and real things, when they finally arrive, do not need to announce themselves. They simply stay.